So in the world of game design and resilience, we can learn a really cool approach to making something new. And not just interesting, but in a way that considers the reality of how people live and ideally changes that reality to be better. Now, we all know of different ads that are totally not real, like someone practically worshipping a razor. And that's not real. We all know that it's probably tucked away in a shelf somewhere or in a cup 90% of the time, and that nobody looks at razors that way. The reality is that people face unexpected issues, daily chores, problems, stresses, and have really long days. Products should seek to actually make those days better in some way. So without further ado, let's jump into game principles for making cool products and changing lives. So in resilience, we have this concept where, for the most part, people face the reality. And the reality is that they have stresses, they face problems, and they go through this daily grind. But then there's this separate world that's defined by creativity, wit, and imagination. And this concept is called margin. And this is a place where we can re-examine our realities and come up with a way to change things. It's a place where we suspend the reality for just a moment and turn on our imagination and creativity. And it's actually fun. Stepping into this margin is actually a very fundamental behavior. So 100 years ago, there's this guy named Johann Huizinga, and he wrote in Homo Ludens about how puppies play. So the way puppies do it is that they jump around and bite at each other gently, and a biologist or a psychologist would try to attribute this behavior to them practicing hunting or establishing dominance. But a design read of that situation is that actually these aren't important. And what they're doing is that they're simply playing for play's sake. All of this other stuff that happens is a good result of those actions, but the puppies play because it's fun. We can see this in a lot of other areas. Kids pretending while on a playground, dancers performing in a hall, or, people watching movies, basically any hobby. So people want to access this state of creativity and imagination, and then sometimes a lot of good could happen as a result. In resilience, this state of pretend is usually accessed intentionally to solve problems by going into what we've been calling the margin. And now games are really good at setting up a stage for people to get into this state. In game design, this concept is actually called the magic circle. In the magic circle, normal rules do not matter. You tune away from life and become deeply engaged with a new set of norms that are sometimes fun. So let's take soccer, for example, or, football. The magic circle, it's literally drawn on the field, but it's in the shape of a square. And so when the ball is in the magic circle, the game is played. And if it ever goes out of the magic circle, then the game is paused until the ball comes back into play, and then it resumes again. So in another example of how games create this new set of norms, usually killing people is frowned upon, but when you play a video game set in World War II, then that is all you do. So in the game, murder is okay. Outside in the real world, murder is not okay. And the thing that's interesting is that, for some people, it's not even stressful as you would expect murder to normally be. But if designed well, the game, it could actually help people feel better and unwind. So that's the first lesson. In life, we have all of these different things in our way, like deadlines and different directives that we have to face day in and day out, like the daily grind. But in the world of games, these things they're still obstacles. But all of a sudden, what you see is that people start facing this with this attitude that they want to do it. They want to get through them, and it's actually exciting for them to do that. And in this world, we have all these different concepts and tricks that help people access this new way of thinking that's more in line with comfort, imagination, creativity, and fun, and a lot of these other positive qualities. And I want to teach everyone watching now how to apply all of the tricks and principles games use to making products. It's not enough to make a pretty object, but also it's about designing the entire environment around it so that it'll help people feel better after a difficult day. And so, as an example to teach game principles and how they apply to products, I'll use one of my favorite products. A book. Books are amazing things, both as objects, but also as games. All right, back to the magic circle. Imagine you get home and you have a book you want to read. Nobody just grabs a book mindlessly and reads it. It's not like a sync or a remote or a phone that you can just use whenever you want. You'll take a book, you'll get into a comfy chair or a bed, and you'll make sure that the light is right. Then you get up again, you make a cup of tea, you sit back down, you yell at someone for some peace and quiet, and only then can you start reading. All of that is the magic circle. It's everything that you must put in place to make sure that reading is possible. You're about to hallucinate vividly while looking at ink marks on a page, but to get there you have to make sure that the space is right. So for objects, how do you ensure that the environment around your object is right, and how do you invite people into a magic circle before using your product? All right, so that was the magic circle for a book, and it's the room that you set up before you sit down to read it. Now, looking at the book itself, this is actually a type of game, and there are 4 types, and each type has really particular dynamics of how people act. A book is the most basic type of game. The book is something that we call a player versus game. The book is big, it's got lots of words with tiny font, and it will require your effort to make the book work for you to get something out of it. Cameras and photography, brushes and paintings, and any individual activities are a player versus game. They use objects designed for one person to use so that they get some sort of reward from it. There is also a player versus player type of game. That's the second type. And this is a competition game. In this type, it is you versus someone else. Tag, mini mobile games, martial arts, and those competitive chess clocks where people have to, push the button to make before the other person can go. This is a great example of an object designed for 2 people to compete together. So the next type is a game type that we call a co-op game or a cooperation game. And it's a player plus player versus a game. This is like dancing, where the game is to do something beautiful on the dance floor, and it is up to 2 people to work together to make it happen. Now, Zoom, the video online conferencing platform, is a cooperation product. It's designed to make many people make business decisions by being able to speak to one another. That's the game. And then there is also, children toys that are made for parents to play with their children. Those are also really good examples of cooperation games. Now, the fourth and the last type of game is something that we call multiplayer. And this is where you have a player versus a game versus the player. It is when people have different tools and different goals, but they all work kind of around the same thing. Interestingly, a lot of jobs in societies are actually organized in this way, where everyone is doing their own part, but towards a greater goal. In social media, the game is to create a giant network community, but some people post photos, some people type stories, others leave likes and comments, and everyone has ulterior reasons for doing these things. But the point is that social media platforms are designed to make those actions possible. So we learned that this is a player versus game type of game, and it is set in the magic circle of the room. And the next concept that we have to come up with is the type of fun. For books, you get this by looking at the cover and by looking at the title and the art. And they set an expectation in the reader and builds a promise that if you read this book, you will get this exciting story set in the Star Wars universe. And with this book, this type of fun and promise is called narrative. So I've also got this children's book that's got all these buttons that make sounds. And for this type of book, the type of experience that the child would mostly get is called sensation. And sensation is a type of fun that appeals to the senses. They should also have made this thing, smell nice or even taste nice to make it really, really sensation type of fun. So here are all the different types of fun. We've got narrative that we've just covered, which you can experience a story in like a book or something. Next is sensation, where we also just covered that, and that's the type of fun where you're experiencing something with your senses. So it's not just sound, it could be taste, hearing, like, really nice music, or, the tactile feel of rolling a dice or really holding something physical. The next one is fantasy, which is the type of fun that turns on your imagination. The next one is challenge. And with challenge, it's a type of fun where you're learning a new skill. And then next we have fellowship, which is where you are working on a team, and that in itself, or experiencing some sort of community, which is also a type of experience and fun. Next we have discovery, where you are finding something new and unexpected. Then we have expression, where the type of fun is that you are letting you say whatever is on your mind and letting you express yourself in whatever way you choose to. And then the last one is a weird one. It's called abnegation, and its counterpart Zen. So with this one, this is a type of fun where people experience a sense of peace or flow, but it's a weird one. So Zen is the positive side, where you experience flow, but then it's also attributed to mindlessness with abnegation, and it's like scrolling endlessly on your phone or putting coins into a casino machine. And there's a lot of addiction studies based on this type of fun. And so the thing is, you're not limited to any one of these. You can actually mix these up too. There's this really neat product called Superheroic Shoes that uses all of these different types of fun in a very clever way. So Superheroic Shoes are sneakers, athletic sneakers made for kids. And when you open the box, when you get it, the box plays this cool noise. I actually think they used the old PlayStation 2 sound when it turned on. And so that's the type of sensation fun. Then you get a list of activities and challenges to do in the box. And so that's literally challenge. And then also the kids become part of this superheroic club. So that's fellowship. And then if you look on the website, they recently started doing this thing of they created this little superheroic comic book, which works on the narrative type of fun. And what's clever is that all of these different types of fun work very cohesively throughout the entire superheroic universe. So next up is the rules. Rules in a game define how you experience the type of fun. Instinctively, many people want to avoid the rules or not think about them, but they're actually super critical or the entire thing won't work. So with this book, the rules are that you have to start on page 1 and then finish all the way on page 306. And on each page, you have to read from left to right and from top to bottom. If you do anything else, then this book won't work and you don't get that narrative type of fun. And now notice how like the printing of the text on the page and then this binding on the side and the title where it's actually positioned, it makes it really easy to follow the rules. So like the title and the big art is placed on the front cover, and it signifies that you start here and then you sort of immediately intuitively understand the rules. I've also got this other type of book, which is from Japan. It's a Japanese comic book, and they did something really clever. So if I followed the same rules as I would with the other book, it wouldn't make any sense, because you actually have to read it starting from the other side, and you read it from right to left. And so, but they've done something very, very helpful. If you actually flip, they've created a little rule book to explain what you're actually supposed to do with this book. And this is a really, really nice feature that they included in this book to make sure that it works for you. A bad example of rules not working is the Apple TV remote, because it breaks all of its own rules. Sometimes you have to hold it this way, sometimes you have to hold it sideways, and sometimes you have to keep it still, and other times you have to wave it around. And then there are other experiences in games that they've released where you have to do all of these things all at the same time. In fact, there are actually no rules which govern this remote, and so it makes it confusing whenever you have to turn it or use it in a weird way, and that sort of ruins the rest of the experience, and it makes it really, really confusing. So a really important point about the rules principle is how do people learn about the rules that govern an object. So for the book example, I learned to read in school. And very often, many products will use something like a manual. I have this one for dryers from GE. And, it works, but it's super boring and no one actually really likes these. I've seen some other clever ways on people kind of circumventing this learning the rules topic. And one really common tactic I see are people turning to YouTube to find videos of people explaining a product and how to use it and the rules by which it lives by. Then another really clever solution is to weave in this really subtle tutorial where people don't even know that they are learning the rules, but it's all part of a seamless experience. So then some of the other things that are important for rules is the memorability, which is once a person learns the rules, how easy it is for them to remember them so that they don't have to check the rules again. And then we also have efficiency, which is how many rules do you need in order to make the object work. So for the book, it had relatively few rules, but for some, very complicated piece of machinery like a dryer, it probably has a lot of rules. And then finally, accuracy. So, and this one means that for how easy it is for me to actually do the rule once I learn it. So for the example of the remote, if I have to keep it really still, and that's the rule, is it actually easy for me to do this without my hand shaking and affecting the performance of the actual remote? And with that, that brings us to the last game principle that we have to cover, which is the outcome. The outcome is what all of the other principles build up towards. The outcome is the thing that you want people to remember once they actually leave the magic circle. So, like with this book, I'll read it and I'll enjoy a fun story from the Star Wars universe about this guy named Darth Bane. But there are lots of themes and metaphors for me to actually learn and take away from into regular life. In this book, the author writes about authority, power, and the role of government. These are all, life lessons I learned from the book that I will remember when I go back to every day. They are so important because the outcomes is what creates permanent change for people. In resilient psychology, people reflect on reality and figure out what to do in the margin in order to permanently change life so they don't have to deal with hardships anymore. And they are taught by things like this book and all the different actions that you take within the margin or the magic circle, as we've been talking about in game design. Now, the hard part with outcomes is that while they do create permanent change, they are also completely unpredictable. So I will read this book and, I'll take away life lessons about government and authority and power, but another person may read this and learn life lessons about friendship or trustworthiness. And both are totally valid, and both may be totally different than what the author actually intended. And as designers, we get to put in these little life lessons into objects for people to discover and learn. It's good when you can intentionally change behavior to be better. It's bad when you unintentionally change behavior to be worse. And it's downright unethical to intentionally change behavior to be for the worse. So long story short, what I'm saying is that you gotta design these pretty well and just think about what you want these to be, and it's better to make them good. And those are the big principles that I wanted to teach today. The magic circle is really understanding the environment that the object exists in and how you actually invite people in to use it. Then you have the type of game, and for the book it was the player versus the game, and it's basically designing how you want people to interact with objects or with each other. Then we have the type of fun, and this is the promise that you are giving people about how they will feel and what they will feel before they even start. Then the rules is giving people enough explanation so that they know what to do once they enter the magic circle. And we talked also about several different ways to do this. And then also finally, the outcome, which is what the magic circle, the type of game, the type of fun, and the rules all build up for. And the outcome is the big life lesson and the takeaway that people will get from using the product that they can then find useful in everyday life. And really, the ultimate is something that could radically change how a person perceives their world and gives them a new perspective, which is something that I hope this talk accomplished and gave you. Thank you.